Imagine looking at the news and seeing that India and Pakistan have gone to war, and both countries have already detonated nuclear weapons. Within days, tens of millions of people are dead. You may be relieved that you're on the other side of the planet as this conflict. However, you may be shocked to learn that people all over the world will die due to this scale of the nuclear war. When you consider the fact that this is just a war between two countries that don't have nearly as many nuclear warheads as the US and Russia do, the prospect of nuclear war becomes terrifying. I'm going to explain the consequences of nuclear war both in the short term and the long term. With political tensions rising between the US and Russia over the situation in Ukraine, I'm sure many of you have thought about the possibility of nuclear war and the consequences of it. I have spent a lot of personal time researching this topic out of interest, and I'm going to share with you information that I believe needs to be shared. In order to paint the full picture, I'm going to discuss the immediate effects of nuclear war, the long-term effects, and the effects of different magnitudes of nuclear war. We should first consider the immediate effects. A single modern nuclear bomb has the potential to kill multiple million people in a very short period of time due to its destructive force. In addition, each bomb will also cause many individual fires, which often coalesce into a massive fire, which is known as a firestorm. This firestorm causes hurricane-strength winds from its heat, which then fan the flames and spread the fire even more to cause more destruction. But that's just the effect of one nuclear bomb. However, there are over 3,700 deployed warheads throughout the world and 10,000 more in storage. On top of that, no first responders or humanitarian response teams will be able to help anyone in the affected areas. If they do, they will be exposed to potentially lethal radiation. Also, the hospitals in the area around the explosion will not be able to handle the amount of injured people from the nuclear explosion. And the social infrastructure in the area around it would be completely shattered so that they would not be able to properly respond. Early fallout will kill many of the survivors who survived the initial explosion. There are many types of radiation which are left behind by nuclear bombs, but some of the very lethal radiation will last for up to 48 hours after the explosion. Depending on the weather and the conditions of the explosion, dangerous fallout can spread from 10 to 25 miles from the initial site. This graph shows just how far it goes. While the exact shape and size of the spread may vary, this graph gives a good example of just how far from the initial explosion site that the dangerous fallout will spread. The immediate effects of nuclear war are terrible enough, but the long-term effects have the potential to destroy modern society as we know it. The long-term effects would cripple the environment and would kill many people very far from the initial explosion. Fallout, which is the residual radioactive material left behind after a nuclear explosion, would spread throughout the region or potentially even the globe. What is known as an air blast, where a nuclear bomb is detonated in the air, would likely send much of the fallout into the stratosphere, which could then spread globally. Some of the radiation from left behind by a nuclear bomb will last multiple years, and exposure to it can cause many complications in humans and animals, which are at best life-altering, but can be potentially fatal. However, nuclear winter and nuclear famine are potentially the most deadly consequences of a nuclear war. Firestorms would propel millions of tons of soot into the air, which would disperse over the globe and partially block out the sun. Some of it would even go into the stratosphere, which would then take multiple years to properly disperse. This would cause lower temperatures worldwide, which would then damage crops and cause the starvation of potentially billions, depending on the scale of the war. This graph shows just how much certain areas will drop in temperature after a full-scale nuclear war between the US and Russia. You can see that some areas in the southern hemisphere are affected much more than in the northern hemisphere, and that some areas in specific drop by as much as 35 degrees Celsius. Nuclear war would also severely damage the ozone layer, so in the years following a nuclear winter, it is likely that intense global warming would ensue, which would cause many organisms to die, as many cannot survive higher than normal temperatures, while they are able to survive lower than normal temperatures. Also, the increased UV lights, because of the lack of an ozone layer, would cause the increase of occurrences of fatal skin cancers. Knowing the short and the long-term effects of nuclear war, it's important to consider regional and a global nuclear conflict. Irreversible damage will be done no matter what, but the severity will vary. A regional nuclear war using less than 1% of the world's nuclear weapon supply would damage global food supplies and potentially cause a starvation of over 1 billion. This graph shows how the rice production in Asia will decrease in the years following a nuclear war between India and Pakistan. You can see that a year after the nuclear war, rice production can drop by as much as 40%, and it will take up to maybe over 9 years to potentially return to baseline. However, a worse regional war using 30% of the world's nuclear weapons supply could potentially kill a third of the global population due to the combined short and long-term effects of nuclear war. However, the worst-case scenario, a full-scale nuclear war, such as one between the US and Russia, would propel 165 million tons of soot into the sky, which would then drop temperatures in some areas of the world by up to 30 degrees Celsius. Many crops would die because of this, and starvation would ensue, causing over 5 billion people to die. Nuclear war will cause irreversible damage, whether global or regional, due to the long-term effects on the environment and the short-term effects on the areas that are targeted. The consequences of nuclear war should not be taken lightly. It has the potential to destroy modern society as we know it and kill billions, even those who are nowhere near the initial explosions.